Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of our witnesses for being with us today. I especially want to thank Mr. Abraham and Mrs. Gorman for coming to speak about their beloved daughters who were criminally and savagely stolen away from their families. As a father, I too know the pain and devastation of losing a child, and my heart goes out to you and to your families. Anyone who commits a crime must be held accountable swiftly and completely. And immigrants, whether lawful or undocumented, who commit violent crimes must be deported at the end of their criminal sentences. Furthermore, we must end the polarization and dysfunction in Congress so we can pass comprehensive, common-sense immigration reform. We need to make it a whole lot harder for people to enter the United States unlawfully and a whole lot easier to enter the United States legally. Can we agree to an agenda around that? And yet, instead of working with us on basic common sense reforms to make dreamers lawful residents, to fortify the border, to expand the categories for admission of lawful immigrants, and to make sure DHS and ICE are properly focused on following the law and pursuing their basic self-proclaimed mission of keeping us safe from the worst of the worst, our colleagues are conducting an endless series of hearings on sanctuary cities. This is our fourth such hearing. And I'm not sure Republicans have even come to any agreement on what they mean when they use that spooky term. Last year, Trump's Department of Homeland Security published a list of nearly 400 counties that it classified as sanctuary jurisdictions. This caused an uproar with dozens of conservative sheriffs across the country. Their counties were named sanctuary jurisdictions simply because they had strong policies on upholding states' rights and rejecting unfunded federal mandates, and strong policies against conscripting state and local officers to execute federal duties. Stunned by this response, DHS removed the list days after it was published because a list of sanctuary jurisdictions defying the feds could not possibly include so many conservative sheriffs from red counties who drew a strict line around on how much of their locally raised tax revenues and resources they should have to spend carrying out the federal government's immigration enforcement agenda and other constitutional responsibilities when the federal government has a budget far larger than they do. Well, this was a telling collision between Republicans and Republicans. For decades, conservatives argued that the federal government could not impose unfunded federal mandates on localities or boss around state and local officials to force them to do the work of federal officers charged with enforcing federal laws. They even succeeded in the Prince case in 1977 to convince a conservative Supreme Court majority to hold that the 10th Amendment invalidated a provision in the Brady Handgun Control Act, which purported to compel sheriffs and police chiefs to conduct background searches on prospective gun buyers. Justice Antonin Scalia found for the majority, a 5-4 majority, that this provision violated the 10th Amendment, which prevents the federal government, he said, from commandeering state and local officers to use their official time and their local resources to implement unfunded federal mandates under the direction of federal officers. Justice Scalia asserted that this constitutional prohibition in the 10th Amendment was categorical. He was unmoved by the heartfelt claims that the failure to integrate local sheriffs and local police into the federal machinery of gun policy enforcement would result in more gun violence, more death, and more injury. The feds must enforce their own laws, Justice Scalia said. So this is precisely the same mistake which I think our friends across the aisle are making here. We've heard from some of the jurisdictions dragooned into Congress on their official time and their official salaries to participate in this endless sequence of repetitive hearings that they would notify, and they do notify federal authorities of when any immigrant prisoner is set to be released from local jail. And if asked, they arrange for them to be picked up and handed over right away to immigration authorities. No jurisdiction has given them a problem about that. But what the ones who've appeared before us say they cannot do is hold such prisoners beyond the length of their judicial sentences for the convenience of federal officials, both because this practice turns state and local officials into de facto federal workers as Justice Scalia said you can't do, reporting to ICE or the Department of Homeland Security instead of reporting to their own courts, and also because they say, and certainly the people from Virginia who showed up at the last such hearing said, they have no constitutional authority under due process or habeas corpus law to hold prisoners without arrest, prosecution, and conviction. So the position they've taken, which doesn't seem at least to be unreasonable or deranged, is simply they're very happy to work with the feds to turn people over before their sentences are completed, but after their sentences are completed, they can't hold them. So why are our colleagues so desperate to keep pulling this boogeyman of the sanctuary jurisdictions out of the closet? Well, perhaps it has to do with the fact that they voted to give DHS more than $250 billion to improve immigration enforcement. And America has watched as the Department of Homeland Security has used this staggering pile of money to waste on luxurious private jets for the secretary, complete with bedrooms and bars, on overpriced and ultimately useless industrial warehouses to detain human beings that are now being sold off at a massive loss to the taxpayers, on a glitzy $220 million public relations horseback photo shoot and ad campaign for a glamorous Department of Homeland Security secretary who called the slain citizens Alex Preddy and Renee Good terrorists. MAGA Republicans have done nothing as ICE has abused hundreds of billions of dollars to arrest, beat up, shoot, and even kill American citizens for exercising their First and Second Amendment rights. They've allowed ICE to ignore its duty to keep us safe from the worst of the worst, and instead gone after kids and parents coming home from kindergarten, rape survivors who just finished testifying in court, and volunteers at Catholic church soup kitchens. ICE's indiscriminate and chaotic immigration enforcement has also undermined the ability of state and local prosecutors and law enforcement to keep their own communities safe and to deliver justice to victims of crime. They are deporting crime victims as well as key witnesses and informants without any notice to state or local police and prosecutors. As a result, investigations are being thwarted, criminal trials are being thrown into disarray, and American communities are less safe. House Judiciary Democrats put out a report called Acquitted by Removal, how Trump's mass deportation agenda abandons crime victims and allows the perpetrators to avoid justice, which I recommend that all of you check out. Not only is DHS not making our communities safer, it's making us worse off. A recent study found that the metro areas most targeted by ICE in both red and blue states had suffered losses of nearly 670,000 jobs, up to 44% of which were held by American citizens. The immigration roundup is profoundly costly to our communities. The administration's attacks on so-called sanctuary jurisdictions are hurting Americans from all walks of life. One can only regard with amazement the fact that rather than own up to this disastrous record, my colleagues are trying to change the subject and blame the failures of the Department of Homeland Security, not on Kristi Noem and her dysfunctional accomplices and successors, but on the state and local jurisdictions, which did not create the problem, have no real power to address it, and are constitutionally protected from being impressed into service, as Justice Scalia said, by an illegal commandeering policy passed by Congress. DHS has 250,000 employees and a budget larger than that of 150 countries on earth. It has over 80,000 sworn law enforcement officers, more than the number of officers in New York, Chicago, LA, Houston, DC, Las Vegas, and Dallas combined. But despite all of that, our colleagues think that state and local jurisdictions should be using their money and their funds to do the Department of Homeland Security job for them. If our colleagues are serious about public safety, they should join us in imposing guardrails on ICE to refocus their energy on going after the worst of the worst and to ensure that they respect the fundamental rights of every U.S. citizen. They should reinvest in public safety programs that the administration has cut, that supported local law enforcement, assisted victims of crime, and gone after organized crime drug traffickers. And they should push back on the president's shocking abuse of the pardon power, which has allowed drug traffickers and international narco dealers and criminal fraudsters to walk free, depriving victims and taxpayers of nearly $2 billion in unmet restitution. Last Congress, we came together to craft a bipartisan border security bill. President Biden agreed to sign it, but then candidate Trump blew up the deal because he wanted a crisis to run on more than he wanted an actual solution. Sadly, since then, our colleagues have been doing more of the same, holding hearing after hearing on the same topic, failing to pass their signature border bill or even their bill to coerce and commandeer sanctuary cities to do their bidding. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today and hope that we can rejoin together in doing the work of the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.